when they're going to start this tournament. So it is the Byron show over here on Betsperts Golf DFS for this week's Wyndham Championship. Got my good friend Ryan Kloss sitting to the left, right, wherever of me. How are you doing on this fine Wednesday afternoon, my friend?
Yes, I'm doing great. It's, I guess, kind of looking at the schedule, it's all downhill from here. Coming off that Olympic high, I still think back, amazing comeback by Scotty. And yeah, this week, it's the last cut event of the season. We have hurricane remnants flooding Greensboro tomorrow, up to 5 inches of rain. And I think we're probably looking at a Monday finish for sure. And hopefully they can find a way to get all 4 rounds in.
Yeah, Monday finishes are amazing for us content creators, Ron, because all the data is right there, ready to go the moment we need it. There's no overflow of information at all. We're just crunching stuff into 2 days. It's tough scenes, but hopefully they can get it done. It'll be fun to see, the guys on the bubble get through to the playoffs. Are you kind of leaning into any narratives this week, or are we still just leaning deep into the data and the stats?
Yeah, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on a couple of things too. People, obviously this is the last event before the FedEx playoffs. You have this top 70 bubble. I think I read somewhere today that I think the top 63 are pretty much locked in, and so I don't expect a lot of changes. Now, obviously, pretty much everybody in that 71 to 100 range is playing this week, trying to get in. And Lucas Glover did this last year, where he was kind of well outside and. He jumped in, winning this event last year. So, it's hard with golf as a sport where I just don't think you can say, oh, well, I'm really motivated to play so much better this week. Like, golf is tough enough as it is. And I think that, if anything, adds more pressure to a golfer. And so now I think they can prepare maybe a little more. Maybe they're doing a little more homework on the course. I think that is something that they can take advantage of, but I don't really buy the motivation narrative per se. And then another, for me, I think maybe one I'm playing a little bit more this week is I am kind of slightly downgrading players coming over from, the Olympics in France. And not that it's a far trip. I mean, North Carolina is right on the East Coast, so it's not a huge distance. So not a whole lot, but I do think that's kind of an emotional event, and especially guys who are in the mix. Perhaps downgrading them a little bit, but is curious to hear your thoughts on both those.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the guys between 170 or 70 and 100 is probably a better way to say that, are all here trying to get into the mix, except for Ricky Fowler, who's 104th on the FedEx Cup and just taking the week off. Another week off. He has been so disappointing, Ron. I think he's regressed by like 1.9 stroke, almost 2 strokes from last year. So it's been a disgusting year for the Rick, but I'm looking forward to seeing some guys. I think I bet an outright on Victor Perez. He, had a big number, 80-1 or so. He's 71st on the bubble. So it's really, really close for him. I'm kind of finding some affection for the guy. He's a lot more likable Frenchman than Pavon. I think that's also a complete narrative on my side. And then the other thing you had, I think when it comes to this golf course, you can say that like Chesson Hadley often clutches up when he needs to, but maybe he just likes this golf course. I think sometimes people might be like misconstruing the clutch factor of these guys getting in at the final moment versus how the course actually fits their skill set better. So I think that's something you have to avoid. But, at the end of the day, they play here all the time. So it's not going to get, mixed up too much. Were those the 2 questions you had? I'm kind of answering 1.5 there.
Yeah, and then just the guys coming over. Are you downgrading any of those guys?
Most of them, I think, just got a exception for Victor Perez there, kind of thing. So we'll see how these guys get through because, like you said, 4 straight days. Some of them probably checked out early once they couldn't quite get anything done. The guys at the top probably grind it out. That's a tough golf course. You got to be on your game all week, as you could ask John Rahm, ask Rory McIlroy, ask Tom Kim, ask pretty much anyone that was at the top of the board there in front of Scotty for some point. So.
And something you said, I definitely agree with. I think this is, like Chesson Hadley you brought up, I think this is a definite, course history track just because of, it plays the same pretty much every year. You have only 54% driver usage off the tee. So you kind of have this category of players who, aren't longer hitters. They kind of thrive on these positional courses where you have a lot of wedges, a lot of short irons. I think this is a really strong course to play Bermuda putters, guys who, have either grown up in the South, guys who have played a ton, who have shown, they just have really good putting splits on these types of greens. And it's not really a birdie fest, but you're going to have to make a lot of putts here. And these aren't the easiest greens either. And so for me, I think, I'm kind of favoring guys who are proven Bermuda putters. Obviously we'll talk about some of these guys, the Eric Coles, the Denny McCarthy's, guys who maybe even have been struggling a little bit, who just kind of fit the course and who have kind of a track record here. So I think that's a definite spot for me that I'm playing.
It's kind of funny, Ron, isn't it, that the final event to get into the playoffs is a course that's kind of suiting the skill set of a lot of guys that won't find success on the majority of PGA Tour tracks, like the short hitters like Kevin Kisner, etc., Webb Simpson, all of these positional venues with the putting intensity that we're going to find this week. It's kind of fun. So it gives them one final opportunity to kind of just redeem themselves, and we'll see what goes on there. So let's dive right into it. $10,000 range has got 4 guys at the top there: Sungjae Im, Shane Lowry, Billy Horschel, and Siwoo Kim at $10,000. I understand what's going on with Siwoo, but right off the bat, I'm out on Siwoo. You can't tell me I'm going to play a $10,000 golfer who hasn't finished inside the top 5 in the last 12 months at $10,000. So especially, I think he's probably like pushing 15, 20% ownership. So I'm out. For that reason, I'm out. So that's my easiest first fade right off the bat. I have bet him top 40. That's his jam, but he ain't got that upside we're looking for despite the good track record here. So who's your boys? Who are you fading in the tops here?
Are you playing any Sungjae?
I will be. I think the pricing's fair enough that you can play almost 2 10K guys this week, and I'll be teaming him up with Billy at times for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I think Sungjae is pretty much a slam dunk spot. Now we know how that goes sometimes, but I don't think it's something that we should overthink playing him, even with ownership being as high as it is. I think he's got the perfect mix of kind of elite course history with rest and recent form. He's got 4 straight top 12s. So let me make a case for Siwoo, and I do agree with you. I do think there are some interesting spots around him. I think there's some decent leverage plays when you're looking at Cam Young, who I know you probably maybe have some negative thoughts on, but sitting there at 97, I think Billy Horschel at 10-2, a guy who has pretty much elite course history here. But who's kind of inconsistent with his irons at times. But I think with Siwoo, if you're looking to play him, again, he's rested. He's got 4 top 5s here. He's one of the straightest drivers in this field. Now, we talk about motivation. Okay, so he needs a good week here, not only to improve, his playoff standing as far as getting into East Lake, but I think the bigger thing for him is the President's Cup spot. And so, I think that's important to him. And, so again, whether you play into that motivation angle or not, but I think for me, like Siwoo is the most dangerous when he's focused and on courses that he loves. And so this is a course that he loves. I understand what you're saying about he has not shown the upside this entire year. And you definitely need a top 5 for someone if you're paying 10K. So I understand both sides of it. So just kind of, pros and cons to playing him. But I do think you probably, I think Cam Young is a guy who he's heard all the criticism. There's no way he's been able to get around it. So I think, it wouldn't shock me if this is the week where he just plays out of his mind. He has proven, even though he hasn't played here, North Carolina guy, he's shown the ability to play really well on less than driver courses, which surprises people because it doesn't seem like it's a good fit. This top of the board is really interesting with Shane, coming over. Shane's played so much golf recently. So for me, it's pretty much Sungjae, and then I'm going to kind of mix around a little bit of Siwoo, a little bit of Cam Young.
Okay, so just kind of skipping Billy and Shane all together.
Yes,
okay.
Yes.
Okay, I can see it. Shane also, I don't know if Shane's got what it takes to get all the way to minus 20 to win this thing, and I think at the top of the board, Jay, you are looking for guys. You have to find a guy with a good chance of winning this thing, and I don't know if Shane can make enough putts for 4 straight days. Also, it'll be interesting to see if he's calling to roll the ball back at this venue after potentially hitting another driver into a par 3 short of the green. But I just make a joke after the Open Championship there. But yeah, I like Shane's consistency too, but I think my two favorites are Sung Jae and Billy Horschel here. I don't mind Cameron Young. He grades out a lot better. I think he's a better option than Si Woo at a significantly reduced ownership percentage there as well for Cam. So I'm right there with you, Ron, with Cam Young. Safety rankings, he's second for me. He's playing some good golf relative to the field. Like you can look at his results. He's been playing all in these elevated events, but in fields like this, he tends to thrive as well. His tee to green game the last 12 weeks, 12 rounds, has been the best in the field as well. So there's a lot going on for Cam Young. I bet him top 10 as well at plus 300. So put that one out there for you guys. Davis Thompson, $9,200, Ron. Brian Harman, $9,300. Akshay having missed 3 straight cuts at this venue in the past. What's your take on those boys at the bottom of the nines?
So Brian Harman finished tops in my model this week, which, again, a little surprising, with Sungjae here. But, he's the highest ranked player in this field. And, we have a shorter positional course like Sedgefield. He's got a strong track record of kind of raising his baseline performance on these types of courses. He's got some top 10 finishes here. We've seen him this year on a course like TPC Sawgrass at the Players Championship. He finishes runner-up. I just think his accuracy off the tee, his elite wedge game, combined with his Bermuda putting skill. So I like him this week. I think I think him and Akshay are two guys who could easily have been in the upper 9K range. Even Akshay, I think, even higher. I love Akshay at 9-1. Ryan Noonan, he's down there in Greensboro this week. He got to interview him. And he had some, if you haven't seen that audio yet, some really thoughtful answers on, what happened in Detroit, missing that short putt. And then, how, he's a guy who's, one of the best ball strikers on tour. And, he's kind of taken his game to another level. And one of the reasons is his improved putting skill. And so, he goes into, discussing, how the broomstick, has made an impact on him. And so, I'm not really worried about the 3 missed cuts just because he has taken his game to kind of the next level this year. And so I just think 9-1 is just a great value price for, a guy who he's hungry, man. Like he won and he wants to keep winning. And so, Harman and Akshay are my 2 guys down here.
Yeah. And I think, having finished second with a really disappointing performance on that final green can also just really kind of get you going, like that can make you even more hungry than having won already. And I think he wants to redeem himself when he finds himself in that circle. He's top 10 in accuracy in this field over the last 24 rounds, top 8 when it comes to strokes gained off the tee in this field. So that is very important, Ron. And I think getting off to a good start on every hole at this venue, like you mentioned, I think I saw your tweet about the greening regulation rates from the fairway versus the rough here is significantly reduced, once you're in the shit. So I think you got to make sure that you're kind of keeping your ball on the short and narrow. And most of these guys in this range over here are pretty good at doing that, apart from maybe Spieth and Min Woo. But I think on these shorter venues, these long iron players can really thrive too. So what's your take on Min Woo? Because I think he's an interesting name. I think he's one of the lower owned guys. Jordan Spieth being 9.5 that's just straight up name value, not based off of any track record. He's 42nd in strokes gained total in this field, and he's 9.5.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if Spieth, had a solid week here, top 20 finish or something. I just don't see him with the consistent upside to do better than that. Like, you saw him firsthand at the John Deere. He'll have a great round and then he'll follow it up with a stinker. And just like the putting and consistency is what we talk about the wrist injury, and he went into detail on that at his press conference yesterday, how he's probably going to have to get some surgery or something in the off season. But it's even on just his putting, which you would think probably not affected by the wrist as much, has just been so inconsistent. And so he's just a name value guy who I think Min Woo, he's 94th off the tee for me this week, 116th in approach. Like, he's a world-class elite player, but until he improves that part of his game, I just, even at 9K, which some people may think is a value, just not for me this week.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think we will mention Davis Thompson on the way out as a golfer that's incredible form right now and a very solid, affordable price, but I think popular along with the most of the other people looking to play him. In the eights, we go from Davis Thompson to Cameron Davis at $8,900, who I have rostered for an outright. I've rostered for a top 20. Speaking about course history, speaking about getting hot at the right time, Ron, I think Cameron Davis last year was outside the bubble heading into the Wyndham and bubbled his way all the way into the BMW Championship and ran out of soap, so to speak, and the bubbles ran out. But played incredible golf of those 3-week stretches there, and I think at this venue he's putted sensationally well. And the tee to green game, he's second behind Cameron Young the last 3 tournaments really that these guys have played. So he's starting to find that ball striking, the irons, the chipping, all looking good. That's one of my favorite plays in this range, ahead of Aaron Rai, who I think is going to be ultra popular. A lot depends on Rai's putter. So what are we doing in the eights at the top here?
Yeah, this is a tough week because like ownership is kind of coalescing around these guys that, it's hard not to like an Aaron Rai. So, you've got this sustained ball striker who's just been amazing. I mean, he's always been good ball striking, but the putting improvement since he started working with John Graham has been nothing short of amazing. And, a little hiccup at the Open, but before that, he gained 21 strokes putting in his 4 previous events. So it's just unbelievable, the ability that he's kind of taken that to another level. And again, this is a shorter course. He thrives on these types of courses where he can attack flags. And, it's going to be interesting, with, Sedgefield always has soft greens because, with the Carolina Heat, they have to keep them watered. But obviously with all the rain coming, these greens are going to be ultra soft. And interesting how lift, clean, and place will kind of impact some of these ball strikers. And so I think Rai is just going to be able to just attack flags. And I agree with you on Cam Davis. Like with Rai and his new putting coach, I think it's always, whether you're betting or for DFS, it's always really smart to look for big changes in a player's routine. So whether it's a new coach, new equipment, or Cam Davis' situation, we have this hypnotherapy thing that since he started, he wins Detroit and Rocket Mortgage, and then he's had a couple other top 25s. So you look at something like that. You talked about the course history. He was 7th here last year. And again, he's a guy who, you think this big, tall guy, he can bomb it off the tee. But again, he's at his best when he's playing positional golf and he can't get into trouble off the tee. And so I agree with you. I love Cam Davis, love Rai. And then I'll conclude this upper 8K section kind of right in the middle with I think Keegan Bradley's a really interesting play. Hasn't been here since 2017. And just looking at the ownership for him, seeing, kind of in that 11-12% range. And so I think it's a good buy low spot. I don't think Keegan wants to be just this Ryder Cup captain guy. I think we're going to see his competitive best this week on a course that, kind of fits his game with accuracy off the tee, tons of short irons. So, you got guys like Luke Clanton, who's I think still going to be somewhat popular. Thomas Dietrich right below Keegan, is kind of taking his game to another level. So I think Keegan is kind of a sneaky play this week.
Yeah, he is. And he's not that far removed from playing some incredible golf off the tee just a few weeks ago. Like 1 or 2 months ago, he was putting together a stretch of off the tee stuff that not a lot of people have done, in consecutive weeks. And it kind of just fell off the map quite quickly. Must have happened in sync with some specific phone calls he might have got from some Ryder Cup big knobs, but who the heck knows what's going on there. I do like him a lot from a statistical perspective. Bobby Mack at $8,300, 60-1 on the outright side of things. Does he win a third tournament in the year? Or what's the drones like in South Carolina? Are they going to be swarming around him when he's trying to win a tournament again? Or is he just running out of gas a little bit in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm kind of this entire lower 8K range. I've got kind of reasons for not playing each of these guys. I think Dietrich and even Nikolai Højgaard are going to be ultra popular, and they didn't rank out for me anyways on these types of courses. Højgaard I think plays a lot better on courses he can bomb it. Yeah, Bobby Mack, 118th for me off the tee this week. So I think, I'm out on him as well. Maverick McNeely is a guy who you just kind of keep waiting for him to get over the hump, and he'll kind of tease you with these really good rounds, and then a guy who kind of just very inconsistent, collapses on the weekend. And then I think, you got, Harris English is interesting. He might be the one guy I play down here. And then Johnny Vegas, I think, coming off that win, still a little bit overpriced at 8K.
Yeah, I think of those guys, I'm definitely in on Mav. Nikolai Højgaard, I feel like the less prep he does, the better. His best finish on the PGA Tour was at the Farmers, where he only did 9 holes of practice, but he had 36 holes that he needed to practice before the tournament, with the 2-course rotation. Had his best tournament of the year. And since then, he's done absolutely diddly squat on the PGA Tour. Then he goes back to Europe, does some good stuff, and I think he showed up at the Masters. But outside of that, it's been really, really poor for a very talented golfer. The same goes for Mav. Just continues to just not get it done when it matters, when he affords himself the opportunity. But I will be going to him at $8,100. I feel like that's fine. I don't need a savage in this range. If he was priced $9,500, $9,400, it's a bit of a different situation. Grades out really nicely for me. Dollar per point, very solid stuff there from the DFS angle. So we'll see what he can get up to. In the 7s, I'm a big fan of Kurt Kitayama's safety. If you're looking for a cash game option potentially, he's a guy that just is ridiculous. Him and Siwoo Kim are basically the same golfer on. Lack of upsides, but man, these guys can rep out top 40 finishes on the PGA Tour. And yet we've got a, $2,100 difference between the two of them, and they're very similar profiles, in my opinion. So if you want to play Siwoo Kim, just click Kurt Kitayama instead. That's my take on there. I understand you've made your argument for Siwoo, but Kurt Kitayama is a great pivot, $2,100 less for a very similar kind of output there. Other options in this range, we've got some Keith Mitchells, we've got some JT Postons, Eric van Rooyens, all in the 7s. Some really good options if you're in the mood for them, Ron.
Yeah, this 7K range is absolutely loaded as far as what I'm looking for, as far as type of golfers. JT Poston, this is kind of just the course that fits him. Obviously, he has, pretty good course history here as well. So love him. You go down to Keith Mitchell, and I think the ownership I'm seeing around 8-9%. I think people are, maybe a little frustrated at the end of their rope and playing him. But again, he's not on the 8K this week, 8K range. He's 7,800. Wouldn't surprise me to see him have a good week. So I think he's an interesting leverage type play. Pretty much everybody's on Eric Cole, and it's hard for me to get away from him. He had this rough stretch. He's got, kind of 2 top 10s recently. Played pretty well at the Open, finishing 31st. He's 14th here last year. And he just kind of fits my requirements for this week. Positional driver. It fits him off the tee. He's this elite wedge player. Bermuda is his best putting surface by far. And then you go, kind of, Denny McCarthy. We talk about him, kind of the best short game in this field. Still needs, you need to make putts here to win. And so let's not forget that. And so, as inconsistent as he's been recently, 3 top 25s here. And I think clubbing down off the tee will help mitigate some of the driver issues that he's had recently. And, you want to look at upside, you have, the very inconsistent Will Zalatoris sitting here, 7,600. He does have a pair of top 30s here. And so, I think there is some value. Now, whether he can get to 20 under, I think we'd agree that might be a little much for him. But again, if he can, we know how good he is with his irons, and if he can return you a top 10 even, I think that's good value for 7,600. So he's an interesting guy to look at. And then I really love Taylor Moore. He's turned it around, 10th at the Rocket, 12th at the 3M. Good results here. He's got win equity. He's won on tour. Another guy who favors Bermuda greens. So looking at this upper 7K range, I think there's a lot of options, and I'll let you get some words in, and then I'll come back to the lower 7Ks.
Cool. I will see your Denny McCarthy, and I'll raise you a Mackenzie Hughes, who is the same profile again as Denny, playing a bit better than Denny as well, like sporadically at least. His putting can really, really get him through the roof, and it's just been incredible to see what he's been up to there. Around the green, he's solid as well, and I think that's where the most of his scoring comes along. So if you're doing a ball striking model, he's not going to show up that much, but Mackenzie Hughes, he's an outlier guy for me. He graded out third in upside for me in this model. Like I got a little bit more around the green and putting involved here too. So I think that's good to see there as a nice, I'm going to be heavy on him in DFS. Not going to be playing him in betting or anything like that, but I like his chances as a like random outlier over there. Some Will Zalatoris, Ron. I think I saw his presser or someone quote his transcript. He's back to 180 mile per hour ball speed now. And he says he can do that comfortably, confidently, healthily, without pain-free, which is a big deal. I think golf is hard enough when you're doing, playing with 100% health at the peak of your game. When you got at impact trying to swing at 180 miles an hour, you're not going to feel comfortable. And I think that confidence has to return to your game in order to kind of see it in the rest of your field. And we've seen his distance really pop in the last few weeks. So it's good to see him there. I'm looking forward to him kind of bouncing back. He is fun to support. And at $7,600, why not take a flyer on him either? Taylor Moore, as you mentioned, love him too. And then in the bottoms, Ben Griffin, solid option too. I think he's going to be quite popular. We'll see what he can do there. Victor Perez, my one guy I'll be playing from France. I love what he's up to. 71st in the FedEx Cup. Hopefully he can kind of get his way all the way through to the playoffs. He deserves it. He's been playing quite nicely. 4 of his last 6 rounds, right, or tournaments have been top 12s. So he's finding some good form, and he can get hot. That back 9 at the Olympics was awesome. Just watching him coming up that leaderboard while everyone else was faltering, had the crowd behind him. I'm a big Victor Perez fan. And then Michael Thorbjornsson is just an absolute wild card as well at $7,200. We're still trying to figure out what this guy does well. I'm going to be just rostering him anyway at $7,200.
Yeah, you used a good word there. There's a lot of wild cards down here. And Ben Griffin is a guy who finished 4th in my model. And I'm seeing 7% ownership right now. So I'm still a little shocked at his price. Now I know he has a couple hiccups recently, miscut at the Open 3M, but he is a guy who absolutely thrives on courses that are all Bermuda. He is on the rabbit hole. We have the filter where not only can you look at grasses for green types, but you can also look at rough and fairway. And so when you check all the Bermuda boxes, okay, so wall-to-wall Bermuda courses, he is the top player in this field over the last 3 years from a strokes gained average perspective. And so, yeah, he also kind of excels on these shorter positional tracks. And so just kind of a great combination course for him. Finished 4th here. This is kind of when he got on everyone's radar a couple years ago. He does have 2 top 5s in the last couple months. So kind of showing this ability to show a little bit of upside. Another North Carolina guy. So if you're playing that narrative, so love Griffin at 7-3. And then you just, like you said, wild cards, like there's so many down here. You got a guy like Matt Wallace who can really spike on these greens. You've got Seamus Power, who is another guy when you get into these kind of wedge fest putting contests. I agree with you on Thorbjornsson. I mean, he's a guy who could win this week. Like he has that upside. You got Austin Eckroat just sitting right down here at 7-1. Like he's a top 8 ball striker in this field for me. And then another guy who just continues to get no respect, Andrew Novak sitting here at 7-1. And, yes, he does tend to collapse on the weekends, plays really, really well in these opening couple rounds. But again, if you look at his actual production in the last 6 months, he does have 4 top 10s, 8 top 20s. And he does have kind of this spike approach and putting upside that we're looking for, especially when you're talking about this cheap. So, and even if you want to go as far as Webb Simpson, obviously Webb is not the player anywhere near what he used to be. But if you look at his course history here, even last year, like he was really struggling last year, and he still comes here and finishes 5th, which I think some people forgot about. So, you just never know with some of these guys, because I think, as you know, when you get into these shorter where everybody's kind of clubbing down off the tee, it kind of opens the field to these, Webb Simpson, Matt Kuchar, Andrew Putnam, Brendan Todd types. Like there's just so many guys down here that you could mix and match and just go 5% here, 5% there. So yeah, it's really crazy. Even Alex Smalley, Duke guy. So he's a guy who, I could see having a good week. So it's a week to, if you're going to play a lot of lineups, just kind of spread it around down here and then hope some of these guys kind of pop.
I agree, Ron. And I want to ask you about, you mentioned Andrew Novak kind of sucking it up over the weekends at times. Would you say that rounds 1, 2, and 3 are the most important this week, or do you think we're going to get probably likely to get 54 holes? I don't see us getting 72 holes of golf with all the weather and stuff coming. So does that change kind of potentially the kind of golfer you're looking for? Maybe guys that feel like they're playing in the third round, but it's actually still the final round. Like I know you kind of go into it knowing that it is the final round, but it's only the third one of the week on a Monday. I don't know. Like just thinking out loud, what's your take on that?
Yeah, so a couple things here. So yeah, on the rabbit hole, if you go to the player page, I'm looking at Andrew Novak's player page right now, and yeah, he's gaining over 0.6 of a stroke in the first round. It drops down to 0.3 in the second round, and then kind of his big collapse usually happens in the third round. But yeah, I mean, I think just looking from a weather perspective, I think the forecast on Friday is actually getting a little better. So I don't think they're going to play much, if at all, tomorrow. But if they can get guys in on Friday, it looks like the winds are down. I think they're really going to try to get 72 in just because, with the playoffs next week, like so much for next week depends on what happens this week. And so I think they're going to try to, even if they have to play, 24 to 30 holes on a Saturday, Sunday, probably definitely a Monday finish, but I can see them still. I think that may throw everybody off when we're talking about guys who struggle on the weekends because you've got guys playing on Monday. So, yeah, I don't know how much to make of that, but yeah, definitely Novak's a guy who, if you're betting first round leader, that you should definitely pretty much every week take a hard look at.
Yeah, I love it. Lots of fun stuff here in the sevens, boys and girls. So I hope you guys are appreciating these little nuggets from the rabbit hole, from Ron, from myself. In the sixes, we've got every crowd's got a Ben Silver lining, man. And I think he's a guy that's got some really good safety rankings for me. I like Chandler Phillips in this range. Kevin Yu, always a wild card. When it comes to ball striking, he's one of the best on tour for his skill level, I would say. But man, I watched him 4-putt, I think at the Olympics from like 14 or 3-putt from 14 feet or something. Pretty poor stuff from him in that department. But there's some names down here that can really pop. Who are you kind of adding to your mix there in the sixes, Ron?
Yeah, I really do love Silverman. He's kind of ultra consistent in the areas that matter this week, whether it's finding fairways, wedges on approach, Bermuda putting. The guy's got 5 top 20s this year, so love him. I think Ben Coles, his ability to kind of pop on these greens, his accuracy off the tee. Yeah, there's a lot of names down here that you would on certain weeks expect to be a little higher. I think Nick Taylor sitting there at 6,800. I think he's a guy who, 36th overall for me this week. So I think he's some good value down there. I think Lee Hodges, he's 12th in ball striking for me in this entire field. So he's a guy who I think I'll be playing. You want to look at Chesson Hadley with the course history. Yeah, and then kind of getting lower here. I just said the word Justin Lauer. He's 6,700, a guy, when I'm looking for guys down here is kind of course history / consistent putter types. And so Justin Lauer is one of the best putters in this field.
Lauer, Ron, sorry, to just add to that story. Wasn't it 1 or 2 years ago that he had a putt to finish inside the top 125?
Yep.
Missed it. Then someone random went to live and he got in. So I feel like there's a bit of redemption required here, but also a bit of a Cinderella story mixed in at the same time. So just some adding to the narrative world that we not like we agreed on in the beginning, we're not going to be leaning into, but it is kind of fun to think about how these guys' careers have been defined at this week.
Yeah, agreed. And I think a guy like Sam Ryder, who kind of fits that bill as well, a really good birdie or better percentage, a guy who's been very inconsistent, but you get him on these types of courses, I think that kind of raises his baseline a little bit. Yeah, there's not like when I'm looking below 6,500, it's kind of like a black line for me. There's not a lot that I really like down there as far as we're looking for putting upside or course history. Yeah, I think I think for me, like we talked about, that 7K range is loaded. And so, the upper tier is not that strong this week. You got Sungjae at the top, you got some, some other names, but I can see myself kind of playing a lot in that lower 7K range.
Yeah. It's going to be fun because let's chat about some roster construction before we kind of get out of here. Guys like Aaron Badley, Zach Blair, Bud Cauley, Alejandro Tosti are some guys south of your $6,500 like cutoff that I'm a fan of this week. Zach Johnson typically kind of thrives at venues like this as well. So the 7K range is so loaded and the pricing is so soft this week that it's easy to do 10-9-8-7-7-7, versus a 10-9-8-7-7-6 kind of situation that we typically see for DFS. So I think getting ultra aggressive with the stars and scrubs kind of thing this week is one way to kind of differentiate yourself in bigger fields. I think single entries, 3 entries are probably easier to build balanced at venues like this with the kind of pricing we're seeing. So I'm assuming you're going to be leaning into that 7K range a lot, Ron. And how are you planning on differentiating yourself in DFS in the bigger pools?
Yeah, that's the challenge this week is taking all these course fit guys who we've talked about, who we really love, and at least coming up with 1 or 2 guys that are going to be, single digits. So that's where I think a guy like maybe a Keegan Bradley comes in. And yeah, like I think Sungjae is going to be a guy who I'm leaning on heavily this week. But I can also see getting to the point where you're starting lineups with, you go Harmon 1, Bhatia 2, Cam Davis 3. And so instead of maybe just cutting out that entire, Sungjae through Jordan Spieth and just starting your lineup with a Brian Harmon, I think that's going to be different. Maybe a way where you can kind of go with a lot of win equity there if you're looking at Harmon, Bhatia, Cam Davis. And then you have a lot of room to kind of fit guys in the upper 7K range. So if you want to go at JT Poston and, have him be your 4th guy, and then you're kind of looking at, I don't know how much that would give you, but I think you could get really creative if you kind of skip past those top 6 players as well.
That, Ron, is something I haven't thought about yet, because you can do like a really balanced stars and scrubs situation there, starting in at $9,300. Because what your average starting salary is $86,600, so at 93, you're barely kind of making a dent there. And then by the time you're clicking Akshay, it's $9,100 still. So I love that idea. That's a really interesting, and it is one way to get yourself different. Potentially just going like with the core 3 or 4 guys in that range and kind of rotating in the 7s for 2 of them at the bottom. So I fancy that quite a lot, actually. So one guy, Ron, that you're playing north of $8,500 that's not named Keegan Bradley that you want to lean into as like a serious pivot, just to kind of, if you're not going to go with the balanced 9s.
Yeah, so looking at ownership here, I don't know what you're seeing him at, and I don't know how popular he will get as we head into tomorrow, but I think I have Cam Davis at 11% right now. And so I think if that holds, if you can get someone like him that has kind of this combination of course history and guy who kind of fits these positional tracks, and we talked about the hypnotherapy thing. So I think he's a guy who 8,900, I think that's a really good price. And if his ownership stays in check, I think he's a guy that might be one of my favorite plays.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up my ownership quickly here. And I think what I'm going to be doing is leaning into Cameron Young as well. He's around about 13.5% as well. Like he's almost the same ownership as Spieth at some spots. So I think he'll be my guy that I'll be leaning into. The 2 Cams provide you some leverage in this field, and they've got their issues, but I think you have to find someone at the top there for sure to kind of differentiate yourself some way. So that's awesome. I'm in the mood for some Wyndham Championship stuff this week. It's going to be a good final week if we get some good golf. If not, we can just wrap up some Olympic sports and just kind of catch up there. So lots of fun stuff, Ron. Tell people what's going on for the rest of your afternoon/evening.
Yeah, just for everyone out there, keep watching the weather. On the Discord, we'll be putting some updates in there. Kind of a DraftKings article coming still, and always looking at 3 balls for tomorrow as well. I know you love doing those 3 balls. Looking at kind of where we can find some edges and these guys who tend to pop in the first round. So yeah, all that stuff, and we got more more additions coming to the rabbit hole. We got some, as I told you last week, some interesting finish position data that nobody else has that kind of really looks into it in depth, and hopefully will kind of help you find some more edges for those of you who like to, bet top 10s, top 20s. And looking at kind of throwing all the rabbit hole filters that we have behind that to see what we can come up with. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, there is definitely, I did some research or reflecting on my year so far. I have lost in my Breaking 100 article run $190 in the outright market. So I'm betting 10 to 20 bucks in the outright every week. Lost almost 190, but I've won over 200 in the placements. So I'm like barely staying afloat, but that there's definitely value to be found in the placement markets, and using percentages like that is what I've been using to kind of navigate all of that stuff. So great stuff, additions there to the rabbit hole. I think, if you can integrate that with your bets, trying to just sustain a bankroll, it's a great idea. As always, you can catch me at the Model Maniac on X with all my stuff going on at Rotoballer, and on Back9Bet. Did all my stuff there last night. So awesome stuff, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Byron Show here for the Wyndham Championship on Betsperts Golf. Let's have a great week. And in this weather, don't forget to pivot your face off.